My name is Orko Chattopadhyay. I teach in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences in IIT Gandhinagar. I am an ex-student of Jadavpur University Department of English, where I was fortunate enough to be taught by Santanu-da, Professor Santanu Biswas. It's been a number of days, and yet it's still very difficult for me to talk about him and come to terms with the fact that we have lost him. I could not meet him for a number of years because of his medical condition, the loss of voice, and the fact that he was not in a position to meet people since almost COVID. There were a few missed opportunities that I regret. But I was happy that Santanu-da agreed to do an online talk that I organized here in IIT Gandhinagar in the Medical Humanities Colloquy about his own clinical practice after a lot of pushing and prodding. I did get the chance to talk to him once before that talk. The talk was read out by his PhD student Dibbo Komal because he was not in a position to deliver that talk with his voice constraints. He asked me not to record the talk, and I honored his wish. I was very happy that he honored my wish that he does the talk. I had a conversation with him the day before, or a couple of days before the talk, where I remember Santanu-da saying, if I think it was easy for him to deal with his medical condition because he's a psychoanalyst, I was wrong. That's quite a rare expression of difficulty on his part, someone who was never willing to admit or even share his difficulties with us, his students. It's very difficult for me to explain what Santanu-da meant to me, will always mean to me. That cannot shift tense, especially for those of us in whom he planted the seeds of Lacanian psychoanalysis. He set us on a path that we are still on. Since I work on Lacanian psychoanalysis, I can say that for myself at least, that he showed us a certain path that has in a way defined our lives, created an intellectual trajectory for us. So much so that I think this is perhaps the most important death in my intellectual life. And I'm still coming to terms with or trying to understand what this death means to me. Let me say a couple of things in terms of what Santanu-da taught us. I could go for hours, but very briefly, the temporal ethics of understanding is something that he taught us. The fact that we have to give something time and concentration. He made sure that we did not take up psychoanalysis just because we were impressed by his teaching, by his charismatic teaching. He tested us. He tested me, I can say for myself. He tested me, and that was his ethics. He made sure that I took up psychoanalysis not because I was interested in Santanu-da and his charismatic teaching, but I was organically interested in Lacanian psychoanalysis. He was instrumental in requesting Shupriyadi to be my MPhil supervisor while he was away in Melbourne on his second journey, I think, in his clinical training. He took me on as his PhD student and yet encouraged me to go abroad and do my PhD elsewhere, where I could also get clinical training, get my own analysis done. And he wrote my recommendation along with Shupriyadi. He wrote my recommendation letter to Western Sydney University, where I eventually went and did my PhD. I remember Santanu-da describing me as someone who is passionate about Beckett, with his characteristic emphasis on the sure sound of passion. in the conference that he organized on Lacanian Psychoanalysis, when I asked Shomoda, Professor Shomobrata Chaudhuri, a question after his presentation on Badiou and Beckett. His unique ability to recognize the difference of the other's desire and his grooming that made sure ethically that we all pursue our own desires and not his is something that I would take away. Apart from, of course, the final lesson of his last few years, which is a lesson in admirable resilience and courage. I was happy to fly down and meet him one last time after he was gone. I was glad that I could be there for his final journey. And when I understood the gravity of his medical condition and the fact that he worked under so much physical constraint, it was almost impossible to imagine him writing this book, for example. And perhaps a little bit ironically, I was reading this book on the day he passed away. A few days before that, I had started reading it, and that very morning I remember waking up and reading a part of the introduction to this volume. He wrote this book in English and another book in Bangla that will soon come out with so much physical constraint. It's almost unbelievable to imagine, the kind of difficulty he would have faced physically to write 2 books and a number of articles that he wrote in his last 2 or 3 years. I would take that away from him, and I would take away that lesson in courage and resilience. The fact that he continued his own clinical practice all the way until the final month of his life, despite all the physical constraints he had and the minimal movement that he could make. I do want to mention a few things that I have thought of, and I'm sure many students of Santanu-da would want to see these activities. The first is a volume of commemorative essays on Santanu-da, not just the person, not just a memorial volume, but also essays that analyze his work, create a space for critical dissemination of his work. And ideally, I would like to see the volume that we could edit being published by Jadavpur University as a tribute to his 30 years of teaching at the Department of English. I would also like to see a seminar series on psychoanalysis, an annual seminar series on psychoanalysis at the department that would be named after him, of course. We are trying to collect his articles, and that should become a book, all the articles that he wrote for all these years in different journals and edited volumes. He has left a huge volume of lecture notes, which are characteristically meticulous and well structured, and most of which actually deserve publication. He has collected books on psychoanalysis, journals on psychoanalysis all his life, and has an absolutely brilliant collection which needs to be preserved. Ideally, again, in the student library, I would say, in the Department of English, we could create a memorial section on psychoanalysis named after Santanu-da, and that would give access to anyone who's interested in pursuing work on psychoanalysis. It will be a treasure trove for any future researcher. There's a lot we could say and do to honor, amplify his intellectual legacy, and I'm sure in our little capacities we'll try and do that collectively. Let me end by invoking Paul Celan's ethics of mourning when he says in one of his poems, "The world is gone, I must carry you." With the untimely demise of Professor Santanu Biswas, I do feel a certain sense of worldlessness. The world is gone. It is true, but Santanu-da, we must carry you. The world is gone. we will carry you, Santanu-da. Thank you, Nilanjanadi, for organizing this memorial event and allowing me to speak. I hope this little message reaches the department and his students, present and past. Thank you so much.